Hello everyone and welcome back to another video from the Francophile. It's Jalen and Maria and we hope you all are doing well. In today's video, we're going to be doing a Q&A about working in France. Before we get started, please make sure to follow us on all of our social media. We do have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and our blog.
If this is the first time that you're interacting with any of our content, we thought that we would give you a little background as to who we are. We're two Americans who moved to France for the first time in 2019 to participate in the teaching assistant program in France.
Afterwards, we went to do our master's degrees at the Université d'Orange Champagne-Ardenne. I studied production, logistics, and procurement management with a concentration in sustainable logistics and supply chain management, and I now work full-time in logistics.
I studied public law, European integration, and global governance, and now I work full-time in international relations. Because of a few comments and messages that we got on our social media, we decided to open up a Q&A about working in France because that's what you all have been asking for, and a lot of them have already actually been answered in the content that we've made before. So we have one video that kind of talks all about how we got our jobs in France, and a bunch of articles about the entire process. So we'll link the videos and the articles that are related below, and we won't be answering those questions over again today.
The main subjects that you all asked about that we'll be covering today include the job search, our residence permits, and what it's like to actually work in France. So let's get started.
The first category is job searching in France, and question number one is, how did you go about job searching? To be honest, we didn't do anything too out of the ordinary. We just really used the internet. For the most part, we used job search websites, and sometimes we went to specific organizations' websites to apply directly if we knew for sure that we wanted to apply there.
There's all sorts of job search websites that exist. Some are more specific to a particular field, while others are more broad. We used both, and we had the most success using the big ones like LinkedIn or Indeed, but we'll put on the screen all the different websites that we did use during our job search. The next question is, what residence permit did you have during your job search? So we both had the Recherche d'emploi ou création d'entreprise residence permit. This translates in English to the job seeker or new business creator residence permit. It's kind of a mouthful, so from here on out we're going to be referring to it as the job seeker residence permit.
This residence permit is 1 year in length, and it gives recent graduates in France having completed a qualifying degree program 1 year to look for work, get professional experience, or start a business.
The nice thing about the job seeker residence permit is that once you have it, you can begin working immediately without having to first ask for an autorisation de travail, which is a work permit, or do a changement de statut, which is a residency status change. Typically, to hire a foreigner that doesn't already have the right to work, employers will have to demonstrate that the job posting has been posted for at least 3 weeks and that no suitable candidates with the right to work have been found. However, as someone with a job seeker residence permit, you can find a job that's in line with your studies and that pays at least 1.5 times the minimum wage, and the employer is exempt from having to do any of that. Getting a work permit is often one of the biggest roadblocks to foreigners trying to immigrate to France through work, and so the fact that the job seeker residence permit facilitates that process is really nice.
We would highly recommend the master's degree to job seeker residence permit route because it definitely facilitated our entry into the French workforce. The next question is, do employers have to sponsor you? And the answer is yes and no. The job seeker status means that for 1 year, you don't need a work permit and you don't have to immediately do a residency status change. So for that year, no sponsorship necessary.
However, the process that most people are referring to when they say sponsoring is the work permit, which is necessary to do a residency status change to salarié, which is salaried worker status, or travailleur temporaire, which is temporary worker status. If you would like to use your job seeker status to gain professional experience during the 1 year validity and then leave France afterwards, you don't have to worry about any of the sponsorship. However, if you want to stay in France through a residency status change, then in that case your employer will have to sponsor you.
The next question is, were potential employers aware of your residence permit and did they understand your working rights? And I'm smiling because it's almost funny. Of course not. Not at all. We had to explain in very minute detail to every single potential employer once it came up and we were far enough in the interview process what our current working rights were, that we would eventually need to do a residency status change, what that process would look like for them, what the process would look like for us, and everything in between. As you can imagine, all of the details and formalities that go into hiring a foreigner can scare employers away, so it's really important that you know what you're talking about.
It's in your best interest to make sure that you know how to succinctly describe the process in a way that makes it sound doable, because it is doable. The next question is, how receptive were potential employers to this residence permit during interviews? We had reactions that ranged from completely against it to cautious to totally fine with it. Sometimes we'd go into interviews, and if we didn't have full indefinite working rights, then they weren't interested in moving forward. Other times you would go in and they would be cautious. They would say something like, we'll look into the process, maybe with our legal team, and then we'll get back to you. And then other times we'd explain how to do the process, and they were totally fine with it and on board and ready to do anything we asked them to do in order to get ourselves hired. So the different reactions that you can have while you're looking for a job with this residence permit really run the gamut, and you can't really know in advance. So when you go into these interviews, as the topic comes up, you'll know how to deal with it based on how the employer reacts.
The next question is, were your employers helpful with regard to your residency status change? And it's kind of hard to answer this because it's not that they weren't helpful, but there's not much for them to help with. They did fill out the necessary paperwork, of course, that allowed us to successfully get our work permits and successfully complete our residency status changes. But beyond that, they didn't do anything to facilitate the process or even follow up with us about the process past that. We were on our own to ensure that we completed all of the administrative formalities that we had to do to legally work in France.
The next question is, was the status change from job seeker to salaried worker complicated? We would say that it wasn't too complicated. However, it is a two-step process. First, you have to get the work permit, and then you're able to do the residency status change. It was a pretty lengthy process, however, because from requesting an appointment at the Sous-Préfecture de Palaiseau, which is where we live, to actually having our residence cards in our hand, I waited for 6 months and 1 week, and Maria had to wait for 8 months.
Our camera cut off in the middle of this take, so editing Jalen and Maria are here to voice over what didn't get recorded.
We're moving on to the second category of questions, which will be all about working in France.
The first question was, how many hours do you work per week and how much vacation time do you get? I work around 38 hours per week from 8:30 to 5 Monday through Thursday and 8:30 to 4:15 on Fridays with about an hour for lunch.
I work around 39 hours per week from 8:30 to 5:30 Monday through Thursday and from 8:30 to 4:30 on Fridays with about an hour for lunch. Back to the video, sorry about that. As
far as vacation time goes, I work in the public sector, so I have the standard 25 days off, but I also have an extra 18 vacation days, which altogether that makes 43 vacation days per year. In France, the standard work week for full-time jobs is 35 hours per week, but since we are both contracted to work more than that, as are a lot of people in France, we are compensated, and for me, that looks like extra time off.
I work in the private sector and I have the standard 25 vacation days. However, my compensation for the time worked over the standard 35 hours comes in the form of money rather than extra time off. The next question is, how do you find the work-life balance? We both find the work-life balance to be good. We're happy with it. Like we said, we get those standard 25 days off, and Maria gets even more than that. So on that front, awesome. On a day-to-day basis, we actually find ourselves working a little bit more than our contracted hours. And that's because maybe sometimes we're in a busy season or we just have that one task that we want to get done. But at the end of the day, that's a personal choice, and we really don't feel like we would have any consequences if we weren't doing like overtime. And so that plays into the good work-life balance that we have as well. We work with people who fall into the work hard category, overtime all the time, and we also work with people who do it, just enough, exactly what they're supposed to. And right now in our careers, we find ourselves kind of falling into that first category, but we don't think we would have any consequences or issues if we at some point fell into the other category.
The next question is, how do you get to work? We both take public transit, and we actually don't have a car at all, and we've never had a car since moving to France.
We live in the Parisian region, which means that we have the Pass Navigo, which is the public transportation subscription card, My employer reimburses it at 50% and Maria's employer reimburses hers at 75%. The next question is, what are salaries like in France? Salaries in France are lower than in the USA, but this comes along with a lower cost of living and socialized benefits. Our specific salaries, like we talked about earlier, in accordance with the status change process, are at least 1.5 times the minimum wage here in France. As far as general salaries, it's kind of difficult to talk about because they vary so much based on the profession you're talking about, whether it's the public or the private sector, what point in your career you're talking about, or even if you're a man or a woman. All these sorts of things make the salaries vary. But we can give you some averages that can kind of give you a rough idea of what salaries might be like here in France. So the overall average monthly salary in the public sector in France is 2,380 euros, and in the private sector it was 2,520 euros. These are averages though, keep in mind, so these aren't necessarily the salaries that you'll be making straight out of the gate after your studies, for example. But it's an average, so it can kind of give you a rough idea.
We are both happy with the lifestyles that we are able to live and the savings that we're able to put away with the salaries that we have at the very beginning of our careers in France. The last question is, how good does your French level have to be for working in France? And it's really hard to kind of give a definitive answer that applies to everyone because it really depends on the job. We've heard that it's possible, especially in Paris, to find jobs where the working language is in English and you don't need any or much French. But that definitely severely limits your job opportunities and your career growth opportunities if you're only looking to work in English. For jobs like ours, fluency is non-negotiable. We do things like take phone calls, write emails, run meetings, give presentations, handle high-stress situations, all in French. And honestly, beginner or even intermediate French probably wouldn't cut it. You'll open up your initial job opportunities, but also your growth potential the more French that you learn. And so we always tell people that the more French you speak, the better off you are as far as your working in France opportunities go.
And we're always saying this, but even outside of work, it is imperative as someone who wants to live in France long term that you learn the language to fluency because it only facilitates your life here.
That is going to be it for the Q&A today. We hope that our answers were helpful to you, and if you have more questions after watching this video, feel free to leave us a comment down below and we'll do our best to answer them.
And before we go, please make sure to follow us on all of our social media. We do have Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and our blog. And speaking of our blog, we do have blog posts that are specifically about working in France, how we found jobs, really everything in relation to this video. So if it's something that interests you or we haven't touched on certain things that you want to know about, make sure to check out our blog posts that are really, really comprehensive on this subject. I mean, we haven't really seen anything else on the internet that goes into as much detail as we do about these processes. So if you don't usually read blogs, make sure to check out our blog posts, which we will link in the description below so that you can get more information about this. And yeah, we'll see you all in the next video.
Bye.
Bye.